So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Trump Tyranny Tracker. How are you, Olga?
Good. Busy watching, the dictator run around and set off hell in the U.S.
It really is that. I mean, it's day 140 that we're looking at today, officially on the Trump Tyranny Tracker, and it is probably the most significant attempt to achieve this authoritarian uh, g- grab, if you can call it that, over the last few days with what's going on in LA. We'll talk a lot about that coming up in the second part of today's show. But there are some things in the Trump Tyranny Tracker that we should get to because some people might not be aware that these things are happening, and they're big stories. So let's catch you up on those. The first is a Chinese tech executive with ties to the Communist Party. He Tiangying received VIP treatment after purchasing $3.7 million in Trump's meme coin. That's the stable coin, Trump coin, I guess is what they call it, earning him a private dinner with Trump and a White House tour. Despite Trump's crackdown on Chinese nationals, he attended under a nickname and bypassed background scrutiny. Unbelievable. The Communist Party of China has one of their officials dining with the president under his meme coin, whatever that was, a drive
Yeah.
to get to get bribed, basically. Wow, what a revelation.
It definitely is. Before I get into it, Arlene just asked, I posted, it's the top post on the notes. It's on Google Meet, and it's an 8-week seminar, and we're going to tackle all the tactics that authoritarians use. I'm going to be looking at it from a lens of Russia, and the comparison seen here. And yes, so Trump is, railing against the Communist Party. You have the whole far right calling all of us communists. They don't even know what a communist is. Um, yeah, Trump is here inviting, someone who is connected to the Communist Party officially to Chinese officials, giving him a White House tour and, inviting him to a private dinner and he gets VIP treatment. Bypassing security, that's extremely key. So as we learn more about this scam dinner that he had, we're finding out more and more of some of the people who were there and the fact that someone can put a fake name and just walk right into a VIP dinner with Trump and walk around our White House, the people's White House, is incredible. So, I mean, it just goes to show you that this, presidency continues to be for sale, and they are all hypocrites when calling out, China when Trump had a Chinese official roaming around our White House.
And it's not too surprising to find the Chinese behind all of Trump's crypto investments because we've been noting that in the past. We've done lots of work here on your website and on mine where we've identified Chinese investors behind all of Trump's crypto policies or crypto investments. So here it is being exposed. You now have the facts of everything we've been reporting that there is in fact a Communist Party official involved in that as well and getting these tours. Someone was asking if this is the same person connected to Andrew. It's not the same person connected to
No, it's
Andrew.
not the son, Justin's son. This is
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah, there's lots of Chinese money floating around in the world of Trump crypto. This is a big story. People should keep an eye out on this. His connections to the Communist Party of China are much bigger than we believe or others believe. Into the second story, it's all about Starlink. Elon Musk's operatives installed Starlink satellite internet at the White House without notifying security staff, creating unmonitored connections that bypass cybersecurity protocols designed to prevent leaks and espionage. Doge ignored internal warnings and whistleblower reports to House Democrats about their security risks. This is something you and I both have been covering a lot of. Starlink is a very menacing device, and it's now your authoritarian tool.
Tell me about it. I've been screaming about Starlink since the fall of 22
You have.
when Musk was shutting it off for Ukrainians when they were about to carry out key operations, and the fact that he was shielding the Russians by sabotaging Ukrainian operations. I mean, we were up in arms at that point. But here you have Starlink, that can be intercepted by any foreign government connected to the White House. sending all communications on unsecured servers. And it just tells you, again, that I mean, they are all literally endangering our national security. If it's
Mhm.
whether it's, having signal chats and planning military strikes, and Hegseth was part of, a dozen more or so signal chats on different areas of the world. To this, I mean, why is, Starlink in the White House? We have
Mm.
specific, you know, procedures of how information should be sent on what type of servers, what kind of technology should be used. And the fact that you have this without the White House staff even knowing. I mean,
Don't forget, Starlink was also found in some other government buildings as they were doing their Doge work. And it's believed by many whistleblowers, at least one in particular that went on the record, saying that some of this data was siphoned off from these government departments directly into Starlink and then directly to Russia, which can happen. The thing about Starlink is it bypasses the wired internet. It's a satellite service. Stuff goes up there and, it goes down wherever they want to downlink it. And Elon Musk can definitely control who gets to see that information. So there's no tracing of it. There's no record of it. We don't know what was taken, what was given. We don't anything that was coming in and out of the White House during that period could have been subject to Russian infiltration, and we would not have known.
and for that matter, Chinese and
Yeah.
Iranian. I mean, the
Hmm.
Iranians are crawling all over our servers. The Chinese are crawling all over. One of the biggest attacks, cyber attacks, happen to be not by the Russians, but by the Chinese. So the fact that any foreign government can, basically intercept these communications is extremely dangerous. And again, they are doing everything against protocol, against procedure, and it's gonna cost American lives at the end of the day. It's gonna be American military people who are, affected if something gets intercepted, or a terrorist attack in the U.S. that's gonna, harm American citizens. This is gonna cost Americans, lives, not the White House.
And of course, the Chinese and the Russians have a no limits partnership. I mean, they're strategically aligned to each other. So, what one does, the other one is interested in it. And they are essentially running the same kind of foreign policy. That's a big story. I hope we hear more about it, and I'll certainly look into it a lot more narrative. The other big story from the Trump tyranny tracker you've identified, which is just unbelievable, is a guy named Joshua J. Smith. Now, he's a Tennessee businessman and a former federal inmate. He was pardoned by Trump in 2021 for drug trafficking, has been appointed the deputy director of the Bureau of Prisons. So a former drug dealer is now running the prison system in America. He becomes the first formerly incarcerated person to hold such a position within the BOP, raising questions about rewarding loyalty over qualifications. But this is even more than that. This is rewarding criminality.
Yeah, so again, I mean, we could just imagine the route he'll take, while having this position and flooding prisons, what with drugs. Is he going to go back to drug dealing?
It's a
The
market,
whole
I
thing,
guess.
the whole thing is absurd and dangerous. And I mean, how? There's a reason he is the first incarcerated person who is running the Bureau of Prisons. I mean, there's a reason that you have to pass a criminal background check and not have been convicted of any crimes
Yeah.
or even participated in any crimes. Um,
You're so right,
to
because
have
if you've been pardoned, you still have to admit you did the crime. So it's not like he's not guilty of what he did. He is guilty. He just got pardoned. So that does not allow him necessarily to become the guy in charge of
not a
prisons.
pardon. A pardon does not erase it. And then it goes back to the bigger, again, hypocrisy.
Mm.
All these issues, immigrants, we're after drugs and we're going to go after drugs, and everything they're doing. These are test cases to expand, executive power and authoritarian power over Americans. Because, and same thing with the anti Semitic issues. I have documented over a dozen people inside this regime holding high level positions who are tied to either Nazis or white supremacist movements. And it just shows you if Trump was really serious about drug trafficking, do you put a drug trafficker in to control a major agency? No. So, I
It's
mean, the whole
unbelievable.
thing. eh,
It also tells you how few people are actually willing to work for this administration, that they are reaching for the very, very bottom of the barrel here. Like they can't find anyone willing to go in on this criminal regime. So
And
they're
it
hiring
tells you,
criminals.
and it tells you we're being so flooded with news. I mean, something like this should have been a main story. You're not going to find it anywhere. I mean,
All
no one's.
three stories you've identified today on the Trump tyranny track that we've just covered would normally be the main story of the day in any given news day. But because of what's going on, because of this crazy amount of news flow that they're providing us, it's impossible for anyone to focus on these stories. And even if they did have time, I guarantee most of these stories wouldn't make it because the administration would not be supportive of them. It's really a testament to your work that you've been able to identify these stories, and these stories are actually coming to light. Another good reason why everyone should support the Trump Tyranny Tracker and Olga's work, because it's really foundational and it's going to be very important in the future as we trace back what's happened in America. Should we talk? Is there another question, another story here, or no?
No, then the rest is for what is happening.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about LA because, what we're seeing is really a federal assault on a city, on a state. There's been no approval by the governor to not even consultation by the governor. There's now threats to arrest the governor, threats to arrest the mayor of LA. This
Hmm.
has become about as clear as an example as you can point to of an authoritarian grab, creating an event, amplifying that event, provoking the violence around that event, and then using this enforcement to crack down on it. This is what you've been telling us for years, and what we're showing in our course. But tell us a little bit more about how this is exactly that.
So, I mean, for those who don't know, the majority of my time I spent on documenting things happening in Russia. And, I've documented so many protests and human rights abuses and murders. I actually have, yes, a file, that dates back to the 90s that has every single person who was murdered or disappeared by the Putin regime, even before Putin, but particularly when he was deputy mayor in St. Petersburg, and there were journalists that were assassinated. Um, and in around the George Floyd protest, I was warning because I've documented so many of these protests and the tactics are used. I started seeing very similar tactics in U.S., particularly in Portland, where you had unmarked vans pulling up with people with no
Hmm.
insignia, no identification, nothing. No one knew who these were, and they were grabbing people off the street. And I mean, on my Twitter was going on and like showing side by side, this is what happens in Russia. Since the election. I mean, I did the dictator, now that we elected a dictator, what to expect. And this was one of the tactics I knew was going to be one of the first things that Trump would do. I mean, it's controlling the space, it's attacking media, but at the same time, doing everything to quash these protests. And the tactics we are seeing are identical to what Russia does. I mean, first of all, there's a reason states have their own power and control over the National Guard unless there is a real rebellion across the country. This is not a rebellion. The media, yes, there is violence in LA, but I mean, this violence is, uh, you know, like held to a few blocks. This is
Yeah,
not the
and
whole
managed.
LA.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and LAPD knows how to deal with this, just like NYPD. They
mm,
know how to deal with these situations. What Trump did is he decided to throw fuel on the fire because he had a very bad week, and what better way, to distract and flex his authoritarian powers than to order the National Guard to go to LA. And everything since then coming out, I mean, frankly, is something that I have been screaming about in Russia, whether it is, the threatening of jailing of local officials and the governor,
Mm.
whether it's Don Jr. saying that we should shoot the protesters. Really? This is America where we bypass, the court system and just go ahead and just go to a firing squad.
These people
I
are
mean, they
expressing their First Amendment rights. They're just, they're protesting. They're allowed to do this. It's part of America. And what this government is doing is creating the chaos that we're seeing. And, I published a piece over the weekend and another one today showing how Stephen Miller, who's the chief advisor to Trump on all these things on deportation and immigration, actually in an ICE meeting a few weeks ago, asked people why why the ICE teams had not been to the Home Depots in places like Paramount in California, which is in fact where they landed up going just over the weekend, and where one of the biggest flashpoints was in Paramount, just outside of Santa Monica. But it was Stephen Miller himself that pointed out where to go. So he lit the fire. He sent the troops in, and now he's reacting to that chaos by sending the ICE and the National Guard in. It's a typical story of them just creating the clash, creating the conflict, worsening the situation, going to cost lives, as you point out, and more than that, it's really subverting the Constitution. We're heading to a point where they're going to try and install either the Insurrection Act or some sort of suspension of habeas corpus, or something that is going to be detrimental to everybody's rights in America. And that's the trajectory we're on right now.
Yeah, and I'm, surprised it happened in LA. I was expecting New York was going to get this first because Trump has so much animosity towards New York that I was sure that New York was going to be the first
It's
state
because
where
Stephen
he
Miller
tries.
has
Yeah.
animosity towards LA because he grew up in Santa Monica. And as I pointed out in my story today, a journalist, Janine Guerrero, who I interviewed many years ago about Stephen Miller, found out that Miller was born to a rich family. But when his father's business went bankrupt, he had to go to public school in Santa Monica, in a
Oh
diverse
no.
school. And so that has been that was the start of his innate racism. And he told his Latin friends that he couldn't be friends with them anymore. This was he became very, shamed about his dad's business collapse, but he couldn't reconcile the fact that he could no longer live his life of privilege. And this, personal point of retribution is how we get to this constitutional crisis many years later. It's unbelievable, the group of people
Well,
they've
what
collected.
what frustrates me, honestly, and this is partly one of my frustrations with the Dems. We knew this.
Mm.
We knew all of this. Trump in 2020 wanted to shoot protesters. He actually asked, his Joint Chiefs and the Pentagon if he could shoot protesters.
Hmm.
We had Black Hawk helicopters in Washington, D.C.,
Buzzing,
hovering
buzzing.
over the protest.
Yeah.
We had, Trump attempting to, threatening at the time to send in the National Guard to Chicago, to New York, to Portland. We knew this. And the fact that over the past 4 years, no one took preparations in Congress to safeguard some of this and didn't take it seriously. I mean, we should have been prepared for this because this is, I mean, as clear as the sun is coming up the next morning of where Trump is heading. He had guardrail there. You had the Millies and, others who said, no, Mr. President, we cannot use military on U.S. soil or to shoot protesters. Now, you have people like a drug trafficker who's in charge of one agency, other, lunatics in charge of other agencies, a drunk, headset threatening to send in Marines.
Mm.
I mean, Marines, imagine in LA, you need what? A battalion of Marines running around to do what? I mean, Marines are meant to be deployed overseas, not to
Certainly.
fight the American people and to what? Kill American people? Or are they going to carry out guerrilla warfare? on the
Well, to
streets of
suspend
LA.
the Posse Comitatus Act is what they want to do. I mean, they want to be able to use the army against civilians and against citizens of America, and not for any good reason, to basically revenge their own personal retribution. When you look at Elon Musk, from his apartheid roots, you look at Stephen Miller from these roots now that we know about his privileged upbringing in Santa Monica, and you look at Donald Trump. These are all people prosecuting their childhood, traumas around whatever race issues they've had. This is not a kind of leadership group that you want to have running anything, let alone the government of the United States of America, supposedly the leader of the free world.
And we, with the tracker have discussed for how many months already, the building of a police state, the office now in the State Department of reimmigration. This is a Nazi ideology
Hmm.
to reimmigrate a country, to get rid of all the brown and black people and to make a country white. We now have an office like this that
Hmm.
is going to work with Department of Homeland Security to do what? And that's my point. And my frustration is, like I said, everything that's happening in LA is as predictable as day. I mean, Trump now has all the yes men around it. He's using identical tactics, whether it was in Russia. I monitor Russia, so I could talk about Russia. I've also monitored, Russian activities in Syria and saw what the Assad regime did, in disappearing people, grabbing people, and how they quashed protest. Um, and that's my frustration because we're heading into very, very dangerous territory. There's more of us than them. So we will prevail because the majority of people are not. I'm thinking Americans are like Ukrainians because when security forces in Ukraine, tried to stop the protest and killed over 100 protesters, this only infuriated Ukrainians. This drew out people who didn't even come out to prior protests. And I assume this will happen here, that the more violence they commit, the more people here will say, no, 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 this is not what we want. We don't want tanks rolling through our streets and Marines running around house to house to do what?
Well, this is why it's so important to keep reminding everyone that this administration is causing all of this. This is not, you're going to, because in a few days, we're going to see the violence images and we're going to say, oh, those protesters are being bad or whatever. They're blowing up things or
But that's
this.
what we have local police. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to
No,
cut
no,
you
you're
off.
right. No, no,
We have
you're
local police departments for this. I don't agree
100%.
with burning cars. You're not supposed to burn cars. Frankly, the most powerful protest against regimes is to stand there holding hands. So, I
I
mean,
agree with you.
arm's
Peaceful
length.
protests all the way through.
Exactly.
But just to underline what I was saying is that we've got to remember that this whole thing, this whole narrative has begun from the White House itself, from Stephen Miller telling his ICE, goons to go to the Home Depot in Paramount and started picking up people who were undocumented but not committing any crimes, who are looking for work, who are contributing to the economy. This is the thing. You take all the Latin people out of California, the economy crumbles. The entire economy is run on undocumented workers, many undocumented workers. It's just ludicrous to say that we can remove those people and to maintain this giant economy in California. It's not going to happen.
And it's happening around the country. I mean, that you have many, hardcore Trump supporters who have farms and other businesses who use undocumented workers.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't see him targeting those, his supporters with this. And, again, look, the immigration system is broken here. There's a reason that the parties don't want, the Republican Party does not want to fix it because a lot of these undocumented workers should have already received some kind of documentation
Exactly.
if they are living here, contributing, working, and making sure that Americans have fruits on their shelves, and that their farms are taken care of and everything else. So
Because
I
that's the
mean,
crime that they're saying. So these people are waiting outside Home Depot looking for their day jobs. That's what they do. They're there to contribute to the economy. They're looking to work. They're not looking to commit crimes. They are looking to help grow the American economy, and not receive very much back for that. So to arrest these people in the middle of their capitalist pursuits because you've got a weak immigration policy is ridiculous. Is just unfathomable. So much is going to happen on this story. I love your idea, but people just linking arms and having the most peaceful protests possible. I think that's the key here. This administration wants to see things up in flames. They want an excuse to jump in and be as repressive as they can. The more we can do to just keep it as peaceful and loving as we can, the better off we're going to be at the end of all of this.
And I'll just add one last thing that I've been monitoring Russian chatter, and they're all over this.
I'm
And
sure.
I worry that they will also send in operatives to incite violence. So
I
I
think
mean,
that's a good point. They probably will.
we we have a lot of enemies here because you have the majority of the protest is peaceful, and then you have pockets of violence that is being played on TV, on social media. Again, that's contained to a block, 2 blocks, not all of LA. But my worry is that you will have foreign groups, particularly you saw a lot of mixing in of anarchists with the extreme pro-Palestinian, not pro-Palestinian movement,
Hmm.
but the ones who hijacked the movement to create the violence. They were there with flags and setting things on fire. You have the Russians monitoring that chatter, and a lot of those extreme. Again, I don't want to conflate the two. You have the pro-Palestinian movement that rightfully is trying to shine a light on what's happening in Gaza, and then you have extremists hijacking the movement. The extremists are funded by Iran. So you have and now you have Russians monitoring this. So I worry that they will set off, something that then will lead Trump to further send in the Marines. And who knows, maybe
Yeah.
he'll send a whole battalion. And the last thing I'll say, just to see the backdrop of having tanks on their way to DC for a fucking,
Mm.
authoritarian
Military
parade.
raid. Mm.
Again, something I've seen in Russia a million times. To have that backdrop of tanks heading to DC for this authoritarian spectacle that's happening next week, and at the same time ordering the military against the American people. I mean, it was literally. I could say it's exactly Russia. This is
Yep. This is
we're getting close to a Russia. It's
they.
like
People are asking, are there Russian chaos agents? I don't think there's any confirmed reports, but there are definitely Russian operatives
I
everywhere
am
in America.
sure yeah,
Yeah, there's
they
deployed
have
many.
tons.
They did it during the Black Lives Matter. They did it during the whole Stop the Steal thing. I mean, it's just there's no doubt in my mind that there are operatives on the ground, and they are on social media and elsewhere as well, fomenting this. So you're seeing a lot of the posts on X or some of the influencers on the right wing, all paid for by the Russians. People are asking what they can do. We've got about a minute left. We should tell people what the best things that they can do. What do you suggest?
Well, for starters, be careful what you share, because that's another thing that the Russians, besides having operatives on the ground, the Russians also share dated videos. So,
Mm,
like for instance, you have LAPD cars on fire. This is from 5 years ago, and they'll repurpose these. I remember during the Portland protest, which is extremely dangerous. They were the Russians that I tracked it down to Russia. They were pushing out a video where a police officer was set on fire by protesters. That happened in Guadalajara, Mexico,
mhm.
years
I remember that.
prior. And
Mm,
they were pushing it out as if it happened. Now, picture your NYPD or, Chicago PD, and you see one of your, coworkers, colleagues being burned alive. I mean, so they also do a lot. So make sure whatever you do share, make sure that it is vetted, that it is really happening, and that's it. And continue pushing back against this
and
because
yeah.
We
And call
can't
your
allow this.
congressman. I mean, I know we keep saying it, but that is the route. And write to them is there's a proven record that we have been petitioning our government and they have not been doing the things that we need them to do to redress these imbalances. That's what we need ultimately to exhaust every legal avenue possible. The California government is trying to take the Trump administration to court right now. We'll see how that lands up. But, your petitions to your representatives to say, this is not okay. You can't ignore us. These are the things that this administration is breaking our rights, is breaking our freedoms. What are you doing about it? Is important to keep that as a record, and then keep active on social media and keep watching independent media and spreading verified independent news out there because it makes a huge difference when the real story gets out. It fights the narrative that they're trying to build.
And the last thing I'll say, I spent the weekend like a troll. um, in every single government agency on Twitter. They're trying to rewrite what an insurrection is. And they're trying to whitewash January 6th, which was an insurrection. Because
Without a
when you
doubt.
try to overthrow a government function and the fair and free election using violence, that's an insurrection. Here, setting freaking smart cars on fire is a criminal act. This is not an insurrection. They're
Yeah.
not going and storming and overthrowing the California governor or any California agency. Push back. I probably, like a troll, posted scenes from January 6th in every single thing because do not let them lie that what is happening in California is an insurrection when they pardoned insurrectionist
Yeah.
who had a noose to hang the vice president of the United States.
Yeah, the hijacking of language is unbelievable. That is the Trump Tyranny Tracker for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock, but we'll also be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. for our first official start to the Authoritarianism 101. We'll be taking a look at two very relevant topics tomorrow about identifying or creating enemies and also about controlling the narrative. That'll be tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Everyone who's a paid member to either Olga Lautman's Trump Tyranny Tracker or Unmasking Russia, or anyone who's a paid member of narrative.org, narrativ.org, you get to join for free. It's very interactive. It's on Google Meet. Highly recommended. It's going to be a really fascinating conversation. Anything else, Olga, that we need to say before we go? Because it's been such a jam-packed show. I'm speaking so fast.
Tune in to your 5 stack in 25 minutes now.
In 25 minutes with Dean Blundell. We'll see you on narrative.org. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.